13 through 16. You guys can turn if you want. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. And it gives light to the whole house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Great.
Wow, that's just right in my face. I'm going to do one of these right there. Okay, done. I haven't got to talk to a lot of you since you've been back from break, so hopefully that was awesome if you had a break. This was my first year, again, since I graduated undergrad in 11, having a break because I'm back in school. And let me tell you, you guys that have breaks, just treasure those, all right? Because
Amen.
I never thought I would get them again. And for those of you who have lost your breaks now and you're in the real world, let me just tell you something. Having lost your breaks and getting back to having one again is the best thing in the whole world. It's so great. So I couldn't remember the last time I had 3 weeks to just do absolutely nothing. So it was great. I made this big list of all the things I was going to get done during that time since I finally had free time, and then I didn't do any of them. It was perfect. So, and I didn't fail for not doing any of them, like what would happen when I'm in school, as you're familiar. So yeah, that's great. It's good to see all of you. I think I know most of you, but some of you I don't. So just as an introduction to me, and I'll give a little introduction to New Life as our church. My name is Caleb. Caleb Kraft, if you're interested, both with C's, if you want to spell it out. And I am, as mentioned before, a student here, at Ohio State University, at The Ohio State University, studying higher education and student affairs as a master's program. So that's a lot of fun, ton of reading. My undergrad was in pharmaceutical sciences, so I went from what some would call a hard science to a soft science, but don't tell soft science people that it's soft science, they don't like that at all. So social science, and those are two very different worlds. I talk about my feelings now in class, which there's no need for that in pharmaceutical sciences ever, except for I feel like I don't want to do this. That was the only time that we talked about that. So that's new, and I enjoy it. If this is your first time out to New Life, or your first semester or first year, we're a church, obviously, that meets here on campus. That's I've been going here since I was just a freshman. So I was going to say just a wee little freshman, and I remember some of you are freshmen, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I did anyways. So since I was a freshman, and I love it here. A few things about us I thought I could tell you if I wanted to introduce the church and let you know a little bit about it. Good things to know about organizations or churches are their visions and missions, so I had Mike type those up. So this is our vision statement, aka the thing that we want to see happen, right? And it says, we believe Christ is the source of life, and we desire to see our church, our campus, our city, and our culture thrive. So we want to see full life in the context that we live in, and we believe that the only way to have full life is through Christ. So that's kind of the picture there. And the mission of our church, aka what we do, is gather, equip, and send. And if I wanted to spell that out a little bit, I would say we want to gather students and people, right, to Jesus Christ, to restore relationships with God. We want to equip them to serve Jesus Christ. And we want to send them out on ministry with Jesus Christ. So that's kind of the deal on the mission. Well, if you're wondering, well, where'd you get that from? I didn't see that in a text or anything. Our mission is sort of an adaptation of what's known as the Great Commission. How many of you guys are sort of familiar with that, or you've heard that term before, or you could spell it out right now because you were like a Gold Star Sunday School student, like myself, back in the day. Then you know that the Great Commission is where Jesus basically gathered his disciples after his resurrection, right before his ascension, and he told them all kind of what he wanted them to do. He wanted them to go out into the world and make disciples, aka followers of him, right? And he wanted us to make disciples, baptize them, and to teach them all the things that he taught them. Teach them to obey all the things that I've commanded you. So that ties in now to what we're going to talk about here today. Because this semester we're going through a series called Where We Stand. And basically, it's a look at what's known as the Sermon on the Mount, which is in Matthew, the book of Matthew 5 through 7. Today we're still in 5. And this is either one long teaching by Jesus or a collection of Jesus' teachings, depending on who you pay attention to. But either way, these are famous teachings of Christ. And if we are to be real followers of Christ, if we are to be his disciples, then there's two responsibilities that we have in regards to Jesus' teaching. The first one is to obey the teachings, right? Is to follow the teachings. And the second one is actually to then, later on, teach other people to do the same. So the teachings of Christ and the things that he told us to do and the ways he told us to live are very important if you're a believer. One, because this is the way we are to live. Two, because we're supposed to make disciples and teach them to live this way as well. So going through the Great Commission is really, really, going through the Sermon on the Mount is really, really important. And so today we're looking at a passage of this sermon in Matthew chapter 5, which we just read. And the verses are from, that Felicia read wonderfully for us, are from 13 to 16. So that's where the passage is. If you want to follow along, you can. I'm just going to read it one more time so we can kind of look at it together. And the game plan is, he talks about salt and light. So today we're kind of going to break salt and light apart and look at what it means to do these things, to be these things. And then at the end, we're going to put them back together and kind of pull out some themes. So disintegration and integration, if you want to say that, is the plan for today. Okay, so let's read it one more time. Starting in 13, Jesus said to his disciples, a.k.a. the people who are going to follow him, a.k.a. if you're a believer, you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how will it become salty again? It's good for nothing except to be thrown away and trampled under people's feet. And you are the light of the world. A city on top of a hill can't be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they put it on top of a lampstand, and it shines on all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people, so that they can see the good things you do and praise your Father who is in heaven. I'm going to pray real quick, and then we'll dive in. Jesus, thank you for this community of people. Thank you for calling us to a high and worthy cause. And thank you for giving your life for us so that we can have life. Just be in our time, God. Expose truth through this passage. God, just let your character, your nature, and your teachings be lifted up, God, and nothing else. Thank you for these beautiful people. And I pray that not only would we feast on your word this morning, but that we would enjoy community with one another too. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, let's take a look at it. Salt. Let's start with salt. What does it mean? What does he mean? You are the salt of the earth. This is the thing about Jesus' parables, that they're kind of, sometimes they can sound confusing. If you read the book of John especially, it's another kind of biography of Jesus, there's some stuff sometimes that he says in there, and you're just like, what are you talking about? Like, there's insane stuff in there. Like, this is the one that we always quote, but I'm going to quote it anyways. It's one where he's like, if you want to, basically he's like, if you want to follow me, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. Can you imagine hearing someone saying that? Like, we have the context, some of us have, like, if you grew up Catholic or Protestant, you communion or the sacraments or whatever, but without that context, just hearing someone say that, like, that's insane. Like, can you imagine, like, the president being like, if you wanted to vote for me, you just gotta eat my flesh and drink my blood, and I'll be your president. It'll be great. You'd be like, he's gonna lose, So, but these are the kind of things that Jesus says sometimes. So this one he says, he's looking at his followers, and he's telling, if you're really my followers, if you're really believers, then you are the salt of the earth, right? He says, the salt, if it loses saltiness, it's good for nothing except to be thrown away, trampled under people's feet. And another one he says, if you lose your saltiness, you're good for nothing. You're not fit for the ground or fit for the manure pile. You're just going to be thrown away. So I'm going to go through a couple ideas of what this might mean. And as like a tidbit of why I'm going to give you different ideas, I know if you come from a hard sciences major, like I did, you like one answer. There it is, that's the right one, right? This is what it is. No one talks about how you feel about it. This is just it. All right, now where I'm at now, it's like, well, here's one, and there's another, and there's multiple truths, and all this stuff. So people are like crazy. Anyways, however, there is the word, the text, and I do believe there's something that Jesus really meant. But being so far removed, sometimes it's hard to know, and there's multiple interpretations of what it could be. So I'm going to provide you with a few different ones, and then we'll just talk about, no matter which one's true, some things that we know Jesus meant. if that makes sense. So some people say that this salt refers to good old sodium chloride, table salt, just get a little and So what that could mean, Jesus is saying, your seasoning. You should be the stuff of life. You should add taste and flavor to the environments around you. Now salt, the same good old sodium chloride, NaCl, was also used as a preservative in that time. So, our foods are just stocked full of awesome preservatives now. If you read ingredients lists, it's like a foreign language, or even something different than that. But, at the time it was salt, so, you salt your meat, things like that, it would stay okay. It was a way to preserve things. So some say Jesus is saying, this means you're supposed to be preservative, right? The world is kind of corrupting around us, and we're supposed to be agents to stop that corruption. I like that one too. I like both of those. And if he meant table salt, kind of salt, it could be both of those. Another school of thought is that he doesn't mean sodium chloride at all, but he means this kind of, I guess, they're close to the Dead Sea, right? In this area of Palestine, right? And there's these, apparently people harvested these minerals, and it was like a salt, and they would take it and they would put it and they would mix it into the ground, mix it in with manure. It was like an ammonium concentration. If you're familiar with a little bit of chemistry, that's good for the ground, NH4+, whatever. It was that kind of thing. And they would mix that up with manure and they would use it in the ground and it would help things grow. If you're familiar with agriculture, you know that putting a bunch of salt in the ground is not good. And if you're wondering, I've never heard that one before, reasons why people say that might be the case, this sort of not salt is what he's talking about, is because of the passage that says, if you lose your effectiveness, then you're not good for the ground and you're not good for manure, you're good to be thrown out. So that doesn't make a lot of sense with salt, right? This salt's no good, I couldn't even put it in my manure like I'm supposed to, It's only good to be thrown out. So personally, I kind of like this other translation, this other interpretation, but I gave you a bunch to choose from, so you can decide what you want. Also, if you know anything about me as a communicator, I mentioned to say this earlier, you know that I'm always super prepared, and I usually give you a beautiful outline to follow. But that's actually not true. It's usually a blank page, and it says notes, because Liz contacts me on Thursday, and she's like, hey, do you have the notes ready? And I'm like, can I get it to you on Sunday morning, early? But today, there are notes and even references at the bottom. What? I'd like to mention that this has never been done before, but #grad school, I now have spiritual convictions about plagiarism in sermons. So if I get a point for something, you're going to have it right here. So that third one is an explanation of that interpretation of salt, if you want to be a nerd and look it up on your own, but you have to have an OSU ID, or you can get one from me, because it's the library. Okay, but either way, let's see, what can we pull from these definitions of salt that might be true? And this is going to be your first point. And I encourage other note-taking beside the points, but if you're a blank filler, this is the one. Christ's disciples are agents of full life. Agents of full life. I think whether you go with preservative, seasoning, or this kind of fertilizing agent, you could clearly see that Jesus is saying we're supposed to be agents of bringing full life, or life as it was intended to be, into our world. And so the idea, the entire, I'll just say grand narrative of Scripture is that God created us with this intention for life, that we were supposed to have this thriving relationship with Him, right? It was whole, we were supposed to be whole, find our identity in Him. And we're supposed to have good relationships, serving, loving relationships with the people around us, and even a really great relationship with the whole world in general, right? We're supposed to take care of it and all that stuff. But the story goes, way back even in the first couple chapters of the Bible, is that humanity broke that relationship with God that held everything together. All of our life, all of our thriving was based on that one relationship with God. And that broke. And when that happened, and basically man said, I want to control my own destiny, I want to make my own decisions, I want autonomy, which is such a high value in our culture today, things started to spin out of control. And not only did our relationship with God become corrupt, but so did our relationships with one another, where they were supposed to be loving and serving. We find selfishness and objectification. And with our world in general, big, huge scale problems that we try to address here at New Life, like human trafficking and sex slavery, or just poverty and the great differences between, even in this country, the wealthy and the poor. Those all exist because of this brokenness. And so I think what Jesus is saying is that as salt of the earth, we're supposed to be agents to bring back that kind of life, to be representative of life as it was intended. And I'll go ahead and just give a spoiler, although I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. That's the reason Christ came, right? And some of you are really super familiar with the story, and some may not be, and it's okay either way. But God, in order to address this brokenness, basically sends his Son to live an example of a life that we should follow, to give us these teachings, but more than that, to give us the power to actually follow them, because on the cross he took on all that corruption, all that brokenness on himself. What we deserved, he took it on at death. He was perfect, and he gave his life as a sacrifice so that he could reverse everything. And he's using the community of believers to do that. But it's through a changed life first from the cross, not just a good deeds program that you sign up for to make the world a better place. We believe your heart has to be changed first. Changed people change the world, right? So, but his believers should be agents of this kind of life that we're bringing, life as it was intended. Connected to God, being in loving, others-centered relationships, and thriving communities. And not only living this life, but encouraging others to live it too. Okay, but this is what he says. And by the way, I use the word agents because it's clear from whatever belief about salt you want to choose, is that there should be some kind of effect with an E. Right? I always get those mixed up. I get that marked off on my paper all the time. Anyone else? Great. Okay, thank you. I'm not alone. Okay. So we should have some kind of... the salt represents an effectiveness. We should be doing something in our world. And that's what I think it is. Okay, but he goes on to say one more thing about salt I want to talk about. He says, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how will it become salty again? Or with what will you salt it? It's good for nothing except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. So the second point is we are the salt of the world, but we may not be. So in this he's giving this idea that even though this is what we are called to do, it's possible that we won't do it. It's possible that we may not carry out the effect that we're supposed to. He made the point, so I made it too. All right, let's look at the next section. Light. This one's a bit more self-explanatory, so it's good. It says, you are the light of the world. A city on top of a hill can't be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Some of your versions might say bushel. Instead, they put it on top of a lampstand and it shines to all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people so that they can see the good things you do and praise your Father who is in heaven. All right, how many of you guys have, at one time or another, sung the song? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, come on now, let's hear it. This little light of mine. All right, it's gonna be awkward if we finish it, so let's stop. Okay, but you know that second verse, like, hide it under a bushel? No, don't do that. I'm gonna let it. Do you know that my entire life I thought it was hide it under a bush? Oh no! That's what I thought it was. It never made sense to me. It was like, you can't hide a lamp under a bush. It'll burn the whole thing down. Moses will start talking to it. Whoa, double church joke. Look out. But seriously, it's okay. So if you're curious about that, it's not hide it under a bush. Oh no! It's hide it under a bushel. No! And if you're wondering what a bushel is, I'll tell you. A bushel is a standard of measurement, and it's not exactly the same. I forget what the Greek word is, but it's basically like a big measuring cup. It can hold approximately 4.5, 2 liters of Mountain Dew. So it's about, it's a pretty decent size. And so you could just, it's a big thing that you could put over a candle, which would be silly to do because it would blow the candle out and there wouldn't be any light. But that's what he's saying. That would be silly. Why would you hide a light under a big bushel? That's silly. It'd blow it out. So if you're curious about the bush thing, I just cleared that up for you. You're welcome. So neither do people light a lamp and put it in a basket, but they put it on a lampstand and shines to all who are in the house. Okay, so the point of this passage, light can be sort of a metaphor for a lot of things, such as, turn my notes over. light is good to be understood, especially if we contrast it with darkness, right? So light, a lot of times in Scripture, is used to represent just a goodness, as opposed to darkness, which is evil. Or light can be used in Scripture to represent truth, as opposed to darkness, which kind of means, confusion about what's true, deceit. Light can represent hope, where darkness represents lostness and despair. So, what I wrote down is that we are to be the light of the world, right? So, beacons to a dark world. Christ's disciples are beacons to a dark world. The word for world there is cosmos, and a lot of times that refers not to actual planet like Earth does, but world refers to the people in it. So we are to be beacons to a dark world. We're supposed to be offering hope, displaying truth, exposing darkness and corruption. And sometimes it's worth noting that light is a really good thing, but at times it can hurt. If you're used to darkness, sometimes we don't like light. It exposes evil and corruption. So, people who fight against sex trafficking, for example, are light in a way that they expose darkness. But people who just live lives that Jesus talked about are also light in a way that they point to something greater than themselves. So, we're supposed to be beacons to a dark world. And that second point is we are, but we may not be. Jesus says that our light could be hidden. You could hide it under a bushel. No. A city on a hill is supposed to shine on people. It's not supposed to be unseen. So our light is supposed to shine, but it may not be. And we'll talk a little bit more about what this looks like, but I want to emphasize that this is word. This is word. It's important. Word and deed. So when we were little, we were always told that letting your light shine meant specifically sharing your faith with other people, talking about Jesus to your friends and to whoever else. I was going to say coworkers, but no one said that when you were little. But your schoolmates, all right? And that is true. I'm not even going to say that is true, but you should keep in mind that's true. I'm just going to say that's true. Like, letting your light shine is verbally telling people about Christ, telling people why you have the hope that you do, telling people when they say, you seem to always be, happy all the time or whatever, which isn't always true for Christians, by the way, but sometimes you're told that. And being able to explain, this is the reason for the joy I have. Or when you're getting ready to, have some kind of surgery like an appendectomy, and people say, how are you so peaceful about this? And you explain, the kind of hope that you have. So that kind of verbal thing is true. It also has to be deed as well. So those two things have to go together. In fact, when Jesus talks about light in this passage, he specifically refers to the good things you do. So I think those two have to go together. You have to have a life that is a light and also be able to explain it as a result of the gospel, as a result of what Jesus Christ has done in the world and in your heart. Okay, but it's possible that we may not be. We may hide that light, either in the way we live or we just may not talk about it. We're supposed to be, we may not be. All right, so that's salt and light. That's kind of we broke them apart. Now let's put them back together. We'll zoom out a little bit and talk about the kind of things that they have in common, which I've kind of broken down these three key questions, if you will. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is what makes us salt and light. And for these next two, I'm going to give kind of it means this, and it certainly doesn't mean that. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, so what makes us salt and light? How are we salt and light? And I want to emphasize that we are salt and light because Jesus is in us. That's what makes us salt and light. It's a transformation, as we talked about, that happens in us, and it happens when we are his followers. So you kind of need both of those, that heart transformation and then following his ways. I want to put up real quick, especially in regards to the we are the light of the world section, John 8:12, if you will. Jesus spoke to the people again, saying, I am the light of the world, which is interesting because he told us in Matthew that we are the light of the world. So what's up with that? He says, I am the light of the world, and whoever follows me won't walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So what makes us salt and light is Jesus, period. Jesus, period. And it's what the answer is not, is that we are some kind of superior group of persons that are just good enough on our own. So it can sound pretty, for Jesus to say it to us, it's cool to listen to it. But for us to say it about ourselves, it can sound egotistical a little bit, right? Like, I'm the light of the world, baby. Like, I got this. Like, you need me, world. I'm your light. Or I'm the salt of the earth. I am the thing that's gonna point to good life. And if we begin to think for a second that as a group of people on our own, there's something really just special about us as people, or we figured it out right, and thus we're just a little bit better than everyone else that doesn't believe, then I guarantee you will stop being the salt and light of the world. So we have to come at this with a confidence in Christ in us, but a humility, realizing that it's Christ in us and not just us on our own. So what makes us salt and light? It's Christ in us. It's the gospel that changed our hearts. Okay, that one's a pretty simple one, right? But how do we go about being salt and light? And that's probably the question that I think I'm left with the most, is like, I hear you saying this, Jesus, I like it. And aren't we all like this? Like, we just want a little bit of practical. So for those of you who are coming to the mission gatherings, which is basically like a training that we offer that's for everybody, and even is tonight, and you can come for the first time if you wanted to, from 6 to 7:30, you'll hear more about that in the announcements today. Plug. But, I gave you a chance to do feedback over the break, and overwhelmingly everyone's like, great, love it, give me practical. I need practical. Tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. I need to do something. And I think that a lot when I hear Jesus' teachings too. Like, what I would have liked is, hey, you're the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world, and this is exactly what you need to do tomorrow before lunch, to do these things. That's what I want. And so I know that's what you might want too. I'm not really going to give that to you, sorry. But I will tell you a little bit, a direction to go towards, okay? Because I'm figuring it out myself. But there are two things that I think that are important, and they have to be balanced, okay? And this is one of those things that I'm using my reference for. That second one, I'm just totally ripping off somebody's teaching. But I just want to be transparent about that. But I heard this point, and it kind of just, what does they say, blew my mind, ripped my face off, whatever. Depends what era you're from, I guess. Those are the phrases that float around. However, these two things need to be apparent, and this is kind of true about salt and true about light, is that for us to go about being salt and light in the world, we have to be distinct and involved. Distinct and involved. And I'm going to break those two down a little bit. Okay, so we need to be distinct as opposed to being just no different than everyone else around us. Those are the two options. You can be distinct or no different. But how we are distinct is very, very important. Okay, like we talked about with salt and light, we have to stand out in the way we live and believe, right? The way we love people, the way we serve. These should make us different. Let me give you a practical example for students. I think the average Ohio State student probably did decently well in high school. Most of you, if you went to OSU or you're going to OSU right now, were probably like all-stars in your high school, right? I know that. And then you got here and it was probably just a little disappointing for most of us. Like you used to be the top and now you're the C until the curve makes you like an A- or a B+. That miracle, the miracle of the curve. But nonetheless, there's probably a generality amongst a lot of students at OSU that we are high achievers. I'm a recovering high achiever, I understand, right? I'm working to lower my achievements all the time. But we have high expectations on ourselves, and sometimes we even have just kind of a self-focused agenda that we have an idea of what we have to do, the kind of life we see ourselves living, the kind of success we want to have, the kind of money we want to make, the career we want to have, and having ambition and goals, never a bad thing, okay? Don't hear me say that. But there's a tendency out there to make your agenda the number one thing you're about. I don't know if you know this or not, but a lot of college students are self-absorbed. So I work with them, and I used to be one, so I know. But that's typically the way of the world, like you got to look out for number one, you got to make sure that you're doing what you got to do. But we should be different than that. We should be distinct from that. And that number one, like Christ should be our top priority. And even beyond that, we should at least be loving people at the same level of ourselves. Their agenda should be just as important to us as our agendas. How distinct is that from the rest of the world? Now, I want to be careful with the word distinct because Christians are, at this moment in time, Christians in America as a giant generalization, but we can remember the video Andy showed last week if you were here. Christians are currently distinct from the rest of the world in modern perception. But it's important how we're distinct. Okay, we shouldn't be distinct because people just think we're more hateful than everyone else or we're intolerant or whatever else. Okay, we should be distinct primarily in our beliefs. Yes, yeah. In our holiness, absolutely. So I'm not opposed to those things. But I envision people saying that believers and believers in this body are distinct by the way that they love and serve the people around them. That's not how believers are typically distinct from other people today. So that's important too. I just wanted to make that point. I had like a whole rant that I was going to make about recent things in pop culture and Facebook and TV series, but I decided that I was going to be a good boy and I wasn't going to be controversial. So I'm just going to say that thing right there. But, we should be distinct in this way, and that's kind of the, right, when he says like salt can lose its saltiness, light can be hidden. That's when we're not distinct anymore. We're not doing those effects that we have. But we also have to be involved. Involved as opposed to indifferent. Involved as opposed to indifferent. We should be making differences in our context. This is what the entire vision of our body comes down to, right? We want to see this church thrive, but we also want to see the campus around us thrive a full life. We want to make a difference at OSU. You've probably, if you've been around, you've heard us say that before, that we desire to be the kind of church that if we left, the campus would miss us. They would think, man, they did so many great things for our community here. It's too bad that they're not around anymore. I don't know who would say that much right now about us now, but that's our vision. That's what we're working towards. And honestly, like I see some of you really doing it right now. So I'm excited about where we're at, but we've got a long way to go. I think that it's not too huge for us to believe that about the city of Columbus, too. We want to be making a difference here and working towards that. And also just the world in general. Why not? Why not? Why couldn't God use our church? And realize that God's doing a movement that involves us and a lot of other believers too around the world to be making a difference. We should be involved. Some practical, here it is, practical ways that you can do this, right? So practical. Is one, I think, through relationships. God, Jesus said that if you're going to be faithful with small things first, then I'll give you bigger things later. So it's tempting to hear like, okay, salt and light, I'm going to go end human slavery tomorrow. I'm going to make a difference. And that's awesome. Yeah, I'd love for people to be about that cause. But can you really be involved and loving and serving in one other person's life? Can you do that first? Because you have this vision about you, and that's normal. Like I used to think this about myself, that I was going to be a world changer. I used to read these books about people who changed the world, and I thought, oh, that's me. And I'm not saying that like I don't dream big about what God could do in my life, but did I ever have that vision about just one person? No, never. Some guy heard some guy say once, and I've heard it quoted, and I still quote it, that those who are most passionate about the many are most passionate about the one. And so, can you make a difference in one relationship in your life? We talked about this last week. We'll talk about it tonight at mission gatherings. I'll mention it now. Is that we're kind of putting out a challenge to you in the body for everyone to take one relationship with someone in here, with someone within the body, someone that you can help encourage or build up or just have a friendship with, and work on that. Like invest in one person in this room, and we want everyone to invest in one person who doesn't know the Lord, and build a relationship, a friendship with someone in here. What are your relationships like in this room? Are they surfacey? Do you come in here, listen to the sermon, shake some hands, leave, and don't think about anyone in New Life anymore until next Sunday? Are you involved in a community group? I don't want to sound harsh. I'm not trying to be your papa or anything. I'm just telling you, like, are you investing in at least one person in your life? Could you say when the time you left OSU that you made a difference in one person's life? If you haven't worked on that much, then I don't know if like visions of being a world changer are very practical. We have to start with a small level. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Again, I want to say that like this is a conviction for me, something that I'm trying to work on. So don't think I'm up here beating you up by any means. I just want you to think about these things and wrestle with it with God. But also, you could be involved with some things that we're doing here in the body too. Stove Center, you'll hear more about some of these things during announcements, so I won't belabor them. But we work with inner city kids downtown doing tutoring. We have some service trips in different countries that we take. We do things with international student ministries on Friday nights. Or be creative, something God's put in your heart. Just think about those ways that you could be involved around here. Okay, and then I'm just going to really briefly touch on this last point because I want to honor everybody's time. But for what purpose are we salt and light? And that's just really at the last verse, if you don't mind, Mike Grumpy. Oh, the other one. There it is. In the same way, let your light shine before people so they can see the good things you do and praise your Father who is in heaven. So Jesus says that the reason our light should shine this way, the reason we should be salty, is that people might glorify God. That the people might bring glory to God. They might see the kind of life that you live, the kind of life that we live as a community, and say, wow, there must be something really good about the God that they serve. And I can't think of a better way that God is glorified than when people who are lost and don't know Him become reconciled and return home to Him. And so I think that's probably the big idea, the big picture. Should we be healing our broken world in causes and just issues? Yes. But also, on a very personal, one-to-one level, we should desire to see people return to right relationship with God and thus bring glory to Him that way. So, that's the salt and light breakdown that I have brought to you. And what I would encourage you to do is, if you have those little Connect cards, they're yellow, I think, this week, but they might be multiple colors in your bulletins. If you have one of those, I'm going to leave you with just 2 questions that you can think about, and if you want to write some responses on those cards, that'd be really sweet. Just a handful of us read them, but if you want to be private about it, that's cool too. But at least ask yourself these questions. One, do you have a relationship with God through faith in Jesus right now? As we talked about, that kind of restored right relationship. Is that where you are? Yes? Awesome. No? Is that something you want to know more about? Write that on your card. That'd be really cool for us to be able to have a conversation with you about it. You wouldn't get like 20 people swarming you, I promise. Just one person saying, hey, I saw you wrote that. Do you want to get together and talk about it? So I'd encourage you to think about that. And then 2, ask yourself this question. What does it look like for you to be salt and light? So taking that application question and turning it back to you. What does it mean for you in your work, school, life, family, roommates?